2 days before Salim was supposed to die, Unim was going through an old box in her father's room when she found a note. It was from her late mother to her father before she died. In the note, her mother Jamila apologized to her father Salim for sleeping with another man and getting pregnant while he was away for work. Many years ago, in a small town called Akukot, lived a young man named Salim. Salim was a sculptor who created beautiful sculptures from clay, wood, and stone. He was well known in his town and nearby towns for his excellent work. He often traveled to different towns because he was frequently asked by royals and important people to make sculptures for them. Salim was married to a young woman named Jamila. She was very beautiful, and they had a daughter named Hasina. Salim was a good husband to Jamila and a wonderful father to Hasina. He was very devoted to his family and loved his wife and daughter very much. He provided everything they needed, and they never went without. Young women in the village were very jealous of Jamila and would often tease her, saying she had married the best man in the village, which made her very proud. When Hasina was only 3 years old, tragedy struck Salim's family. One evening, Salim could be seen outside a beautiful hut, sweating and pacing, looking worried. His wife Jamila's screams could be heard throughout the village. She was in labor. After what seemed like an eternity, he finally heard the cry of a baby. The midwife handed him a beautiful, crying baby girl. Salim was thrilled. However, his joy was short-lived when the midwife told him that Jamila had died. She had lost a lot of blood and didn't survive. Salim cried like a baby. The following days were full of grief and sadness for Salim. Death had taken his wife away from him. He named his newborn daughter Unim, meaning my own, and vowed to take very good care of her and his older daughter, Hasina. Jamila's mother had come to help him take care of the newborn baby. She stayed with Salim and his 2 daughters for 1 year. After she left, Salim devoted himself to raising his 2 daughters, Hasina and Unim. He stopped traveling across towns to work and only worked in his town so he could be there for his daughters. Salim was a devoted father. He took good care of his daughters. He cooked, cleaned, and did their laundry. He even learned how to style their hair and did it himself when he couldn't take them to the salon. His daughters always looked neat and tidy. 7 years after his wife died, his friend Gina started encouraging him to remarry, saying he couldn't raise his daughters alone. Gina said, "Look, my friend, you've mourned your wife long enough. It's been over 7 years since she died. You need to find a beautiful young woman to marry so she can take care of you and your daughters. Don't you miss the warmth of a woman's embrace? And aren't you tired of cooking, cleaning, and doing laundry for your daughters? These are jobs a woman should do, which would give you time to focus on your main job, sculpting, earn more money, and spend more time with friends. Besides, don't you want to have sons to carry on your name?" Salim replied, "My friend, much of what you say is true. I do miss a woman's warmth, and my work has suffered. I don't earn as much as I used to, but I don't regret it. I love my daughters and would sacrifice anything for them. I will consider getting married again, but only to a woman who will be kind to my daughters." This started Salim's quest to find a good wife. Many young women in the village were interested in him, but he knew exactly what he wanted. He was looking for not only a wife for himself, but also a good mother for his daughters. He devised several tests to find the right candidate. Sometimes Salim would invite a woman to his house and pretend to leave. he would secretly watch her through the window. Some women would immediately start yelling at his daughters and hitting them for minor reasons once Salim left. He noticed that some even gave his children food without meat, despite there being plenty of meat in the pot of soup. All the women he tested failed miserably. They were kind to his daughters when he was around, but treated them poorly when they thought he wasn't. Salim sent all of them away. He decided he wouldn't remarry until his daughters were grown up. He refused to let any woman mistreat his precious daughters in their own home. Salim dedicated himself to raising his daughters alone. He occasionally enjoyed the company of women outside his home, but he did not remarry. He treated his daughters like princesses, providing them with everything they needed. A few years later, Hasina and Unim had grown into beautiful young women. They loved their father very much and appreciated all his sacrifices. Hasina graduated from university and moved to a neighboring town to work as a teacher. Unim was still in college, attending nursing school in their hometown, Akukot. She went to classes from her father's house every day. Before long, Unim started spending time with Latrice, the daughter of the wealthiest man in town. Latrice also attended the same nursing school as Unim. Salim noticed that since Unim began hanging out with Latrice, she started to change. She complained about everything. She said the money he gave her for expenses was too little. She complained that her clothes weren't as nice as Latrice's and that their house wasn't as beautiful and modern as Latrice's. She also complained that her father didn't have a car, while Latrice's father had several cars and even drivers. Unim never let Latrice visit her home because she was embarrassed by it. Instead, she would go to Latrice's house and spend days there, attending lectures from Latrice's place. Unim was delighted by how the servants at Latrice's house treated her with respect. Latrice started giving Unim most of her clothes, and they began to dress similarly. They would drive around the village and go to their lectures in Latrice's beautiful car. One day when Unim returned home, her father Salim called her and said, "My daughter Unim, I've noticed your change in behavior. You constantly complain and compare us to Ima and her father. I didn't raise you like this. I taught you to be content with what you have. You need to stop this habit, or it will get you into trouble. There will always be someone better off than you, but you must learn to be content while you aim for great things." Salim continued, "In life, remember the saying, 'Not all that glitters is gold.' I have given you and your sister the best I could afford. Please, my daughter, don't let yourself be led astray." Unim angrily replied, "I understand, Papa, but there's nothing wrong with wishing my father was very rich so I could enjoy the finer things in life. After all, you always said we should dream big. Now that I'm dreaming big, you're having a problem with it." Salim said, "Oh, my daughter, those who don't listen to advice will face the consequences. A word is enough for the wise. I've said all I have to say about this matter." Unim, however, ignored her father's words. She began spending even more time at Latrice's mansion and barely came home. One night, Unim was sleeping in Latrice's bed when she heard Latrice, her friend, tiptoe out of the room in the middle of the night. She wondered where Latrice was going at that hour. After a few minutes, Unim got up and secretly went looking for IG. She was shocked to find Latrice and her father dressed in white and eating live worms. Unim quickly covered her mouth to stop herself from screaming, tiptoed back to the room, and pretended to be asleep. She was terrified. She stayed awake all night, but pretended to be asleep when IG returned. She decided to leave Latrice's house first thing in the morning. At dawn, Unim packed her bags and tried to leave. She was shocked when Latrice's father refused to let her go. He confronted her, saying, "Do you think I didn't see you watching us yesterday? You were never supposed to see that, but now you have, so you can't leave." Then he marched out angrily. Unim's pleas were ignored. She turned to her friend IG and begged, "Please let me go. Help me," she said, crying. "I'm so sorry, Unim, but there's nothing I can do." "You were never supposed to see it," Latrice said, also crying. "I have been eating live worms since I was 3 years old. My father is evil. He made a deal with witches for wealth. My mother told me he was once very poor, and instead of working hard and waiting for God's blessing, he made a deal with the devil. In exchange for wealth, he was commanded to eat live worms with me for the rest of his life. If he doesn't, he will lose his wealth. He will die, and I will die too," Latrice said, crying. Latrice explained that when she was 12, her mother couldn't stand it anymore and took her away to her grandfather's house. But after 2 days without eating worms, Latrice got very sick and started vomiting blood. Despite visits to hospitals and traditional healers, nothing helped. Latrice was near death, so her mother had to bring her back to her father's house. As soon as she started eating the worms again, she got better. "I've accepted that I have to eat worms for the rest of my life because I don't want to die. I'm so sorry, Unim," Latrice said, crying. Unim couldn't believe what she was hearing. She had always envied IG, not knowing that IG was actually living in misery. She remembered comparing her father to Latrice's father and how her father had always told her to be content. She had never listened. "Now," she cried, realizing that not everything that looks good is truly good. She wished she had heeded her father's advice. She understood now how honorable and noble her father was, always putting their needs first. He had stayed single to protect her and her sister, Hasina, from potential mistreatment. He had sent them to the best school he could afford, provided them a good life, and never let them feel the absence of their mother. She realized her father was more noble than Latrice's father, who had sold his daughter for wealth. She felt foolish for ever comparing the two men. One day, Unim was forced to eat live worms and she cried. A few days later, Latrice's father allowed her to return home, but warned her she had to come back every day to eat live worms, or she would die. When Unim got home, she locked herself in her room, crying. Salim knew something was wrong. He went to her room to ask, but Unim stayed silent. On the second day, when Salim asked again, he saw Unim vomiting blood. She finally told him everything that had happened at Latrice's house. Salim was shocked and furious. He immediately carried her and ran for help. He went from one herbalist to another, but they all said nothing could be done. Once she started eating the worms, she had to continue, or she would die. Salim refused to accept this. "There must be a way," he insisted. "I must find a way, no matter the cost. My daughter cannot die." After a few days, Salim found a herbalist who agreed to help, but it would come at a great price. The herbalist said that Unim was meant to die, and the only way to save her was to exchange her life for another. Salim thought long and hard, then told the herbalist he was willing to give his life for his daughters. Habal needed some days to arrest the evil man, Latrice's father, who had harmed his daughter. Habal agreed, took Salim's hand, drew some blood and performed the ritual. Immediately God came, and Salim was so happy he hugged his daughter and thanked Habal. "You have only 7 days left," Go, get your affairs in order, and do whatever you need to do," the herbalist told Salim. Salim thanked him and left with his now healthy daughter. When they got home, Mim apologized to her father. "Papa, I am so sorry for not listening to you. See what my lack of contentment has cost you. See how I have hurt you." "Now you have only 7 days left," Unim said, weeping. Her father hugged her and said, "Don't blame yourself, my daughter. We all make mistakes. You are my daughter, and I would give my life for you again and again. So cheer up. But first, I must see the king tomorrow and report all that has happened. That evil man must be arrested and pay for what he did. I must make sure you are the last person he ever harms." The next day, Salim went before the king and reported everything. The king was furious and ordered the immediate arrest of Latrice's father. She thanked the king and followed the police officers to the house to make the arrest. Her father was later arrested, taken to court, and sentenced to death by firing squad. Latrice was not so lucky because barely 2 days after her father's arrest and after she had stopped eating, she fell sick, began to vomit blood, and died. Nothing could be done for her. 2 days before Salim was supposed to die, Unim was going through an old box in her father's room when she found a note. It was from her late mother to her father before she died. In the note, her mother Jamila apologized to her father Salim for sleeping with another man and getting pregnant while he was away for work. Unim was shocked and showed her father the letter asking, "What is this, Papa?" Salim explained, "Many years ago, before you were born, I used to travel a lot for work. I was famous, and people from various villages and towns asked me to make sculptures for them. So I would leave your mother and Hasina and travel for a few days. One time, I came home earlier than expected and found your mother in bed with another man. I was hurt and betrayed, but after a few months I forgave her because I loved her very much. However, your mother never truly believed that I forgave her. When she found out she was pregnant, we both knew it wasn't mine because I hadn't been with her for months. I told her I would take care of the child and not treat the child differently from Hasina, but your mother never believed me. Her guilt consumed her, and her spirit broke. She was sick throughout the pregnancy, and when it was time to give birth, she did not have the will to live. She died immediately after giving birth. This letter is one of many she wrote to me, asking for forgiveness, even though I had already forgiven her. I had locked them away for years and forgotten about them." Salim said, "Papa, am I the child she gave birth to?" Unim asked, trembling. "Yes, you are, but you are my daughter," Salim said, hugging Unim. "That is why I named you Unim, meaning my own, and that will never change." Unim hugged her father and began to cry. "I am so sorry, Papa. Despite not being your biological daughter, you never treated me differently. I would never have found out if I hadn't stumbled on this letter. You still gave your life in exchange for mine, and now you have only 2 days left to live. I am so sorry for everything I have done. I am so sorry for not listening to you." Unim wept. Chin looked at her and said, "My child, you are my daughter, my own. I would give my life over and over again for you if I have to." 2 days later, Chin slept and never woke up. Unim wept all day because Salim had given his life for his daughter.